Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for our first Social Innovation Fund information session. It's good to see some familiar faces. My name is Megan Barp. I am the Vice President of Community Impact for Greater Twin Cities United Way, and we are thrilled to have all of you in the room to learn about this opportunity. It's also our very first webinar here at United Way, so we have a lot of people joining us via web, I think around 30 people as well. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is because this is a national search for the Social Innovation Fund. So a few things that we're going to cover today. I'm going to give a brief overview of our intent today. Michael Gore, the new Executive Director of Twin Cities Strive, will be giving an overview of our work in Strive and what that means as it relates to SIF. I'll be digging a little bit deeper on the actual Social Innovation Fund and what we're thinking in terms of our intent and our focus and the purpose of SIF. And then we're going to dig deep into the evaluation components as well as the financial compliance, which is significant as it relates to SIF, so that everyone knows exactly what we're thinking about. And then we will have ample time for Q&A, so if you do have questions, please let us know, and we're happy to answer those. A couple of things as it relates to being at Greater Twin Cities United Way. Restrooms are right out here. This is scheduled for 3 hours, so if you have to get up and get a glass of water or get some coffee or use the restroom, please do so. I want to do a quick round of introductions so that you know who is working on SIF. The people that we have in the room here today: Michael Gore, again, Twin Cities Strive Executive Director; Elise Weiner, who is our Controller for Greater Twin Cities United Way, and as we joke here, she's my BFF on all things compliance and keeping us in line as it relates to SIF. Michael Micklin, our Lead Evaluator from the University of Minnesota. One person that we don't have joining us this afternoon is Dan Mueller, who's helping us on the goals and measurements components for Wilder, so he has been instrumental in this as well. Lorinda Chagnot, who has been really helpful in terms of getting us set up from everything from the RFP timeline and all of those things. You all met her when you signed in today outside. Michael Grace, who is sitting in the back, he has been really instrumental as well in helping us build out the website that you all will be looking at for more information and to actually apply if you choose to do so. So a big thank you to the team. We're all working on this together, so let us know if you have questions on any of those aspects. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Gore to frame up the work that we have going on as it relates to Twin Cities Strive, to really set that base so that you know what to expect in terms of the goals that we're looking at in the Social Innovation Fund.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is my 5th week here in Twin Cities, and when I got up this morning, it snowed, and Boston was, I think yesterday was 65 degrees, so that's kind of a little bit of my framework. But I'm not so unfamiliar with Twin Cities either, because I originally grew up in South Minneapolis before I left the city and went to Memphis, Tennessee for a while, and as well as then most recently Boston. Then most recently in Boston, I was the executive director. I was a deputy superintendent for Boston Public Schools. So my experience is really in K-12. And I assume, without knowing all the facts, all of you, or if not, majority of you are here because you are helping our students in Twin Cities, either, I'm assuming, either St. Paul or Minneapolis. So I'm going to make that assumption without knowing all the facts. So in terms of the work of, I just want to review briefly with you the work of Strive, soon to come post November 29th. Its name will change to something different. By right now, we're considered called the Twin Cities Strive. So how many of you have heard of our organization? Oh my, I don't have to go through all the background and litany of the information, theory behind the change. So let me just then get to the point. I will not deliver this issue any further. So if you are aware of our work, you know the broader work of what it's all about. It's about, really come right down to it, we are faced with really a major crisis that you are probably well aware of, the issues of achievement gap work itself. So as you know, that a lot of our students who are currently attending Minneapolis and St. Paul schools are coming with a major achievement gap in many different ways. I know a lot of folks define achievement gap very differently, but in terms of I'll define it in terms of academic performance. So essence of the STRIVE is really as a collective approach. How do we get collectively as a community begin to address the achievement gap issue? As you are well aware of, in terms of data that exists in our community, in terms of proficiency rate, in terms of grade 3, which is a leading indicator for a lot of the research that is shown in terms of kids' graduation, as well as you are well aware, I'm sure, graduation rate for Minneapolis and St. Paul. And if you look even deeper in terms of subgroups, some of our students are graduating rate of 25% or less. So it is a major crisis in our community in terms of our future of our community. So STRIVE's work is really looking at that particular spectrum. So what are we looking at in terms of STRIVE? I'm sure most, if not all of you, what did I just do? Most, if not all of you, are working either in terms of either of the spectrums, in terms of kindergarten all the way to probably college, career, post-secondary component of it. So I'm sure if I asked you to put a dot next to it, you can put a dot in terms of this spectrum. This is our work, and this is our spectrum in terms of what we're interested in terms of SIF as well. And you'll hear a lot more from our colleagues in very soon. So we have, obviously, as you're well aware, a major problem with kindergarten readiness. So our kids come ill-prepared for a lot of reasons, and you are well aware of it, and going as they progress in terms of grade level all the way to college career readiness, that our kids are falling behind every step of the way. And latest data shows gap is widening, is not narrowing. So it is a major crisis in our community, and we need to fix the problem. STRIVE tries to look at isolating best practices, replicating successful model, so we can begin to figure out where the gap exists and begin to utilize best practice looking at data. And I hope that you are ready to use data, not somehow inference or anecdotal evidence, but we're going to look at data as a foundational discussion piece, and you'll hear a lot from my colleague as well. So these are the kind of a spectrum that we're looking at. Obviously, you have actual academic goals, as well as then there are supportive goals that are related to student family support that are probably non-related to academic goals. We're also looking at those as well. So in terms of STRIVE and what we're doing, we're about to launch what we call networks. There are a group of folks before I arrived have done a lot of work and made a recommendation to our board, and preliminary recommendation is that we're going to launch 4 networks. One network, we're going to phase it in. Phase 1 is early literacy and college and career readiness. So that is a very wide spectrum, obviously big defined, and we're starting at age 3 all the way to grade 3, and college and career readiness obviously covers a whole lot of spectrum. So you will be able to define it very differently. That's phase 1. We're launching that sometime in early March. And second phase is really teacher excellence and then family-student engagement aspect of our work. While that's happening, we want to kind of emphasize greater community re-engagement. There are a lot of work has been done since I know when this whole work has started in the past 6 months in terms of community engagement dialogue. What we want to do is re-engage community about what's happening regarding STRIVE and launching of our network. We want to re-engage with you as the providers for you to better understand the work of STRIVE. But more importantly, we want to engage with our parents and students for them to understand why this is such a crisis in our community regarding the gap itself and work itself. So we want to begin to identify what's working, replicate it, so we want to make sure that schools are helped. One thing I've learned, I'm sure you have learned this as well, and working in K-12 institution, I've worked in 3 different major urban school districts. Those of us who work in K-12 think we can do it by ourselves. I can assure you, as a deputy, recently I thought the same thing. Leave us alone, give us the money, foundation, we'll do what we need to do. We know what we're doing. We don't need all these partners telling us, we want to do relationship, we want to do this, and we want to do that. The reality is, they can't do it by themselves. We need partners like yourselves to support our kids. On a given day, and every school district I've been to, is that most optimistic on a given day, kids get about 4 to 5 hours of instructional time from a teacher. That means the rest of the time they're doing something else. Before school, after school, then you got all the breaks in between, so our kids need help, right? So we need our partners to make sure they're providing added value that is very targeted, specific, that is based on sound data, helping our students in terms of very specific target areas. So Strive is launching, as I said, 4 networks in category, and 2 initially, and 2 in phase 2. And our work, and you will hear a lot more connection between SIF and our community goals, as well as these 4 particular networks. We want to make sure that as you work, begin to get interested in SIF, also understand what we're doing in terms of Strive, because we want a complete alignment between SIF and Strive work itself. So there's a coherence in terms of what we're doing as a collectively as a community, and more importantly, understand your best practices. What's working, we want to replicate it and have replicate a successful model, and making sure all kids have access to really great service programs that ultimately have a really excellent education throughout their, all the way from kindergarten all the way to really college career readiness. Okay? In terms of what this document does is give you a broad spectrum alignment. So we want to make sure you understand that as the Strive board identify a very particular 5 community-wide goals, that each of the networks that I just talked about are aligned accordingly. So this is kind of gives you a matrix of a kind of alignment and coherence. So you can see visually that each of the networks is aligned to kindergarten readiness and then third grade reading proficiency. As we all know, third grade reading proficiency is a key metric, a leading indicator for kids to be successful in terms of high school and post-high school. So we are very focused on third grade proficiency, more importantly, early literacy as one major work, as I said earlier. And second one is the college career readiness, which goes into get kids ready, being ready in as early as 8th grade math in terms of algebra, all the way up to post-secondary completion, and obviously in between in terms of dropout rate as well as graduation rate. So you can see the kind of the measurement in terms of how each of the networks are connected to our broader community-wide goals. Those of you, I know you are very familiar with what we're talking about in terms of community-wide goals. So we will have kindergarten readiness, third grade reading proficiency, 8th grade math, high school graduation, and post-secondary completion. Okay, so those are the big 5 community goals that we're going to begin to measure ourselves, and also we're looking for a plan and ideas how you will support these 5 broad goals. So I'm going to then yield to my colleague Megan to talk about SIF.
Okay, so we're going to dig in a little bit more to the Social Innovation Fund. So just to give a little bit of context as to why Greater Twin Cities United Way as it relates to this, many of you probably know this, but Greater Twin Cities United Way is acting as the host organization for Twin Cities Strive. So Michael is actually housed here at United Way, and we're providing a lot of in-kind support to get Strive really launched and off the ground here. So he's working in lockstep with our staff here to really make that happen. And if I flash back to March of this year when the Social Innovation Fund application was out and we decided to apply for it, we really wanted to use the Social Innovation Fund to really accelerate the work of Twin Cities Strive. So we were imagining a future where Michael would be on board and we had the goals set and we were ready to implement against this. So United Way is the financial, we have the financial responsibility for this grant and the implementation, kind of the fiscal agency for this. And then we'll be working closely with Michael to make sure that we implement this. So just to give you some details of the award, we were awarded a $2 million grant, $1 million per year for the next 2 years. With available funds, and as long as we meet performance metrics, we will be awarded for up to 5 years. So it's the potential of $5 million over 5 years. $800,000 of that will be invested into what we're calling sub-grants. So you'll hear more about that as we move through this. One of the requirements that you'll hear us say many, many times is that there is a 1-to-1 cash match requirement. So if your organization applied for $100,000, you would need to be prepared to demonstrate that you have $100,000 in cash match available that's not in kind and not being designated for other work currently. So that's something we'll talk more about. So ultimately what will happen is that we will be investing $1.6 million annually, including that match, into subgrants that will align with the 5 goals that Michael just laid out for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that fits together. So the award is through the Corporation for National and Community Service, which some of you may be familiar with around AmeriCorps programs and the like. Essentially, the way that they frame it, the essence of this through the corporation, is that the Social Innovation Fund is meant to drive dollars into intermediaries like United Way to help make the best investment decisions in the community. So we were awarded this grant with the very clear intent from DC that they don't know the best programs, they don't know the best feel for the community and what's happening, and so by investing in social innovation funds, they choose partners like us to say, we're going to run an RFP or a request for proposals process that will actually get at the highest community needs. Once we determine those through the RFP, they want to know that we're able to take those from an evidence-based perspective, which Michael will talk a little bit more about here in a moment, from an evidence-based perspective and take those programs to scale. So it's really about scaling for impact. So as you think about your program or the work that you're doing through the Social Innovation Fund application, we want to know that you have a good idea that has a base level of evidence that has the potential to go to scale. So as you look at the three, the intent of this up here also, it's really about, for us in our particular SIF grant, is all about the youth development aspect, so align with that education component. So ultimately, the goals of SIF is really about producing better outcomes for communities. So they've set forth 3 categories, really about the economic, education, and health outcomes. Again, for us specifically, it's related to youth development outcomes. And for those of you seriously considering applying as well, and Michael Grace will talk a little bit about this during his presentation, we've housed all of the documents related to the Social Innovation Fund on our website, and we'll provide that link a little bit later so that you can look at the actual notice of funds that was released that we actually applied for, all the kind of components that are required around the Social Innovation Fund. Another big aspect of this is that it's really about sharing key learnings from the Social Innovation Fund. We are in year 3 of these funds being available from a federal perspective, and we're one of 20 national grantees who have these funds. So it's actually a quite small learning community, and the intent is to really take this information and share it broadly so that we know what's working in other communities, and we really know how to take the programs and scale those strategies that are working. So you're going to hear us all repeat this a lot. It's about evaluation. It's about scaling what works. It's about looking at that data. Michael said this very nicely in his presentation, that we really are interested in the data and what's working and your ability to show us that what you are doing is working. And then from a macro perspective, it is really looking at how we influence policy from a federal standpoint. So the corporation is really interested in that, so they're the grant makers in this. It's not so much what United Way will be doing individually, but the work that we have going on locally will be fed into this larger community of SIF recipients to talk about how it can influence policy as it relates to this. So this is to give you an idea of the theory of change around this. And sorry, the box on the left is a little bit dark, but so if you look at the Social Innovation Fund dollars, basically you have 2 things happening, which we just talked about. The grant program, so making sure that we're investing in the programs that we know have that level of evidence that are working and taking those to scale. The evaluation, again, is very rigorous, which Michael will talk more about, but really being able to show that we're evaluating not only from an individual perspective, but also from our own portfolio perspective. So whoever's selected as part of our subgrantees will evaluate that portfolio as well. And then it's also about the strategy. So talking again about sharing the knowledge and the learnings from the Social Innovation Fund, and ultimately making sure that we're investing in strategies that have the potential to have impact on the most number of people. So we want to know that the investments that we're making in the Social Innovation Fund actually have an impact on the work happening in the community. So the way that we've been talking a lot about this here is that it's really about making sure that it's child and youth centered, because we know that that's what's really at the essence of Twin Cities Strive as well. And then this is just to give you kind of an overview of what we're talking about as it relates to Strive. And just to reiterate what Michael said in his comments, SIF is meant to be a slice of what's happening in Strive. It's meant to perfectly align with what's happening there. We've been working on this from the beginning since Michael started 4 weeks ago, and I think I overwhelmed you day 1 with SIF, but you're fully up to speed now. So it's really about making sure that we have that good alignment. This is very much focused on the urban core of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So if we have national people who are listening in as well, The capability has to be that you're able to deliver services within Minneapolis and St. Paul within a very specific urban core. So we'll have that loaded in our FAQ that will be online. So just to give you another way of thinking about the Social Innovation Fund, this is actually one of 6 federal grants that actually has this level of rigor when it comes to evaluation and scaling for impact. And really it is about relying on experienced intermediaries like United Way to be able to deliver this. So having a trusted partner. If you look at the list of SIF recipients around the country, you'll see many, many United Ways who are at the core of this work happening in year 1 and year 2, and then again in year 3. The evaluations are very rigorous, knowing that we have at least preliminary models of evidence in place, and we'll talk more in depth about what we mean by preliminary and taking those preliminary models of evidence into at least moderate levels. So we're going to talk more about what that looks like and the expectations around that so you can make the best decision around whether or not your organization should apply. Again, there's that rigorous match component, so making sure that you have partners in place. Upon submission of the application, we're looking for at least a 50% commitment of those matched dollars. And then again, all about scaling the knowledge, so making sure that we're able to share the results and share the information that you all would be learning as subgrantees with the larger population, both here locally as it would relate to our partners of Twin Cities Drive, but then also from that national perspective as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Micklin, who will talk more about evaluation, and we'll get into the details of that.
I noticed on the agenda that I have 30 minutes. I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do it to me. But it is important to, in this preliminary meeting, to give a decent overview of what's going to be expected in terms of evaluation, because it's such a heavy component in the grant program. And I'll try to do that. Of the 4 components on the SIF model, 2 of them speak very much to what I'm talking about. And that's the one that's come up over and over again about evidence-based decision-making and rigorous evaluation. And the other is the component that has to do with capturing and applying and sharing knowledge from the SIF experience. But one of the kinds of words that isn't used here, and they keep talking about evaluation, is that I think successful sub-grantee applicants will be those who are more welcoming to joining a very interesting research project and not being stymied by a notion of evaluation, but that we're going out and doing research together, figuring out how we can do all of this better and more of it too. My remarks today will have a lot to do with the notion of evidence demonstrating, evidence that demonstrates effectiveness from the funded programs. And over the grant period, as Megan said, we have to get at least to moderate strength. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. And I'll move the slides. No, I won't. Slides don't move. Come on. Oh. Thank you, Michael. Yes. I won't read slides to you. You can, most of you read better than I do. I'm going to skip over this and go to one later slide before I get into levels of evidence. And that, both of you have in many other contexts. That is the framework of a logic model. Increasing strength of evaluation data is not its label. That's a logic model. And we're going to talk mostly about evidence now. But successful sub-grantees will be able to present a coherent logic model on what it is we're doing with their resources and why it is that their theory of action, why it works, makes sense. And so logic models will be in here. We'll be talking about the resources, activities, outputs. That is, what is the direct result of what happens because of your activities. And outcomes are the kind of short time outcomes. Kids are doing X, Y, or Z in reading right away as a result of your program. But then there's the impact evaluation, which is so important to us. And there's both near term, which is the one we'll be concerned with, because long-term impacts are usually taken at 7 to 10 years out. But we're not waiting for 7 to 10 years out because we're looking for greater impact right away. And the impact isn't that 90% of the children are where they have to be in third grade reading. It's that families are now healthier and better things are happening in our communities. Those are impacts as opposed to a good score on a standard test, if that makes sense to you. So going back, yes, there it is. Preliminary evidence is where any successful sub-grantee will have to begin. And we'll look at preliminary, moderate, and strong a little more carefully in the coming slides. But essentially what you have in this continuum of preliminary, moderate, and strong evidence is a continuum of greater strength in being able to make claims about cause and effect, causality. Preliminary evidence, just the short version, is you cannot make causal claims because of the way that the evidence that you do have has been collected. The moderate level is causal claims have been established. It's just that they weren't done in such a rigorous way that we can rule out all kinds of other things that may have contributed to why the successes have occurred. Strong evidence comes from very rigorous experimental studies, like randomized controlled trials. And most of you are not ready to jump into that tomorrow. And I would not be surprised if that's the case. So there we go. Preliminary, it's more than a whim. You have a very good idea. You have a strong research hypothesis. Your program or a similar program has some evidence that if you do the things you're proposing, something good happens with kids. They're reading better. Pre- and post-tests show that there's a gain, but it may not have been your own research. It may have been someone else's research that supports that change. In that sense, it's preliminary. Typically, at this level, there was no attempt to find a comparison group, certainly no randomized distribution of, the mice in this box versus the mice in this box, and the one box gets for Cheerios and the other box gets, I suppose, Coca-Cola. That's the way we did it. Here's an example story. Again, I won't read it to you, but essentially the tutoring program goes in, helps kids that are indicated, kids get better. You have some evidence that what you're doing in your tutoring program is working. And people like it, and they want more of it. And you're looking for support to do more of it. But you don't have the kind of evidence that would make a strong claim about cause and effect. In that sense, it's only preliminary. You're not being scolded where it is. Moderate means that we have indeed engaged in studies. And the jargon word is usually quasi-experimental studies. We still can't randomize. But we can find ways of configuring adequate comparison groups. They're not control groups yet. We reserve that for when we can randomize. But there's appropriate comparison groups, and that there are appropriate kinds of statistical modeling so that the proper tests can be run. And now we are further along the cause and effect continuum, and we are able to make and substantiate causal claims, not in the strongest terms, but in moderate terms. And that will be the minimum progress we hope all the programs in the portfolio over several years working in the SIF project and Twin Cities Strive will achieve. In fact, we're committed to that. That's the heavy part in evaluation. Here is another story that you can read at your leisure or read up there. So we have an interesting program, and it's oversubscribed. In other words, there are more kids who are eligible than we can serve. Well, in the jargon, one of the things that this sets up, as long as I have a good metric on why they're eligible, is that I can wait for it. You can do a regression discontinuity design. I know I'll stop, but I appreciate the chuckle. In other words, there's a way of producing a good comparison group, but you couldn't randomize the kids. And it's wherever the cutoff was on the scores on eligibility, and right around that cutoff score, you have large enough groups to do a very nice comparison. They're almost exactly the same. One gets the goodie, and one just gets the same old. And you test them when it starts, and you test them when it's over, and lo and behold, your program has achieved dramatically good things compared to the kids who could have been in your program, but space wouldn't allow them in. That's one way that those kinds of control groups work. It's quasi-experimental. You couldn't randomize. There are appropriate statistics to do it. And there are other kinds of setups like that. But this is a good discontinuity design. It's a setup to tell the story. So, I feel like I know something. Strong support is the scientific randomized control study. The medical model driving all of this, of course. But you want to get to strong, and one of the ways it gets strong besides randomization is that not only do you have decent comparison groups, you have multiple groups that can do valid kinds of inference drawing that says it works for more than just these 20 children that we've been working with. In other words, there are several groups. You've gone out and made what, again, in the jargon we call strong external validity. And that is just the spreading of the populations to which the kinds of programs you're talking about and want to conduct are being efficacious. They're helping all kinds of students and not just a very narrow range of students. And so that kind of study is harder to do, it's more expensive to do. It demands a lot of control because if you're able to randomize kids and some gets the goodie and some doesn't get the goodie but they get the same old, other things are still going on in the world. So it needs a tremendous amount of supervision and I'll call it quality control, and thus gets to be very, very expensive. I hope besides amusing you about levels of evidence, you already have some sense of what I mean by joining in experimental research, because we're trying to get a stronger sense of what works and not just we know it helps. No, one anecdote, two anecdotes, we have a story, but we don't have the kind of evidence that we need. Oh, that's I ruined that story already. One of the things that will happen, and you'll hear more about applying, is that the kinds of documentation you'll need to establish where you are in the continuum of strength of evidence, that'll be established most likely by reports, perhaps even by some kinds of publications. The RFP evaluation will include the kinds of expertise that I bring in evaluation to the table. So it's not just a slogan that you really have to be interested in evaluation. It'll have to be demonstrated in the planning. And there will be a rubric that awards points to various aspects of evaluation, including the design, the ability to envision how you can get comparison groups, how that's going to work. I'll stop now, but we'll have an opportunity for questions, and so I'll be very happy to answer them as we move along.
Okay, compliance. Now, Megan and Michael got to talk about all the fun stuff. I get to talk about compliance. And I'm the controller here at United Way. I come by my title honestly. Everyone will admit that here at United Way. With this federal grant comes, of course, all the requirements of accounting according to the rules and regulations of the federal government. The Corporation for National and Community Service, when we went for some orientation, gave us some characteristics of effective financial management, all of which we'll be looking for when we're looking at the RFPs and your applications and that sort of thing. Policies and procedures, they're very big on the policies and procedures being in place within your organization, reviewed and updated, monitored throughout the organization. Trained financial staff kind of goes without question, and having some experience with federal grants is definitely going to be a positive as we try and roll all this together. As Megan said, this is the third year of the SIF grant, and we're kind of all the intermediaries are learning as we go along the information that the corporation is looking for as far as financial reporting, compliance, and that sort of thing. And every year it changes slightly, so it's not stuck in mud. One of the things that they stressed was cross-training. For instance, if you've got somebody that is going to be, as a sub-grantee, reporting financial information to us so that we can roll it up and report quarterly to the corporation. Having a backup in case that person wins the lottery, doesn't come in the next day, you know, that sort of thing. So cross-training is important, and having the full support of your board and finance committee is going to be very important, because this is going to be time-intensive. Megan calls this steroids. This is a federal grant on steroids, so it seems to be more intense than the normal federal grant process. Probably because they're kind of new in this. It's only 3 years, and they're looking for the best bang for their buck. We'll be looking for an efficient accounting system. You're going to have to be able to distinguish between grant and non-grant related expenditures, so we're going to have to be able to see that you can account for the difference between the grant dollars and the non-grant dollars and expenses by program year and according to the budget categories that you line item out in your application, the direct and indirect costs, and accounting. If you do have other federal grants, being able to account for them separately. This one comes under the AmeriCorps mission, and if you want to know, it's the CFDA 94019. In case your financial person back at the office is going, what do we have to comply with? That's in the OMB circular, so we'll give you some kind of information as far as what you need to comply with. We'll be operating under the basic OMB circulars, cost principles, your A21 if you're an educational institution, or A122 if you're a nonprofit, and then your basic accounting system documentation requirements under A110. And I know, isn't this fun, CFRs and A110s? Ooh. A133 comes into play, of course, if you have expended more than $500,000 for any federal grant in total. If you do have an A133 audit, we'll be looking to see the audit results and the reports from your auditors and that sort of thing as far as the application. Budget considerations. There will be a budget template included in the application. You'll be required to line item out a budget for 1 and 2 years, the first and the second. The budget, because we're granting you $100,000 in a minimum, and then you're having to fund up the match, one-for-one match. You'll actually be line iteming the expenses out based on the grant from us, the sub-grant, and then your expenses related to your match. So you're actually going to have like 4 columns you're going to have to detail out as far as expenses and how you're going to expend those funds. The categories in the template, we're going to be looking for a narrative that just kind of explains how those expenses, you know, whatever the totals are that you're going to spend and how you're going to expend it, how it's going to support the program. Sub-granting, we're doing the sub-granting. You can't, sorry. You get to do the work. And costs have to be allowable under the OMB circulars, the A110, A122 circulars. You have to, in the budget template, there will be detail about including an evaluation component for the cost. We're suggesting 3 to 5%. Megan can give you more detail on that. The major portion of the evaluation cost is going to be covered within the dollars that United Way or Stride is managing. So we just need you to factor in about 3 to 5% out of your budget. And the fun part about being under AmeriCorps is the criminal background check, which will be required, all 3 parts, for anybody who is a covered person. And you can go to that very little teeny website and check out the requirements. But basically, a covered person is anybody who is receiving a salary in this program and is working with the vulnerable population. And the corporation and SIF stress this every time we had a meeting or a webinar or conference, that is the #1 finding, that the criminal background checks have not been completed. So we'll be looking for that from our sub-grantees as far as being completed and in compliance. Megan mentioned the match requirements. There's a 1-to-1 match, cash only, and it has to be from new funding sources, and in-kind is not allowed. So it's pretty rigorous match. If you get $100,000, you need to be able to, at the time of application, be able to submit some sort of a commitment letter that says you've got 50% match lined up, and that you've got evidence that you can find the other 50%. And then the grants management. Our intent right now is to manage the grant as a reimbursement basis on a monthly invoicing and reporting schedule. It has to be a reimbursement basis based on the rules of the corporation and SIF. So just keep in mind and bring your financial people in on your application and such, that you'll have to upfront the money to cover your expenses until you can get reimbursed from us. The invoicing and financial reporting will require supporting documentation for each expense that you're asking for reimbursement for. Make sure that the costs are allowed under the federal regs, and they will need to align with the budget line items that you submit with your application. If there are some changes, we'll have to look at reviewing those changes if you resubmit for, changing a line item as far as expenses. But we'll be looking at those on a monthly basis, budget to actual. Anybody who's anything individual salaries that are being charged to the grant, we're going to need time sheets, time and effort reporting. That is the other finding that the SIF auditors have, is that the timesheets are not completed. They don't support the allocable cost for the salary, the expense. They're not signed off by a supervisor. You know, it's all those little things that they look for when they come out and audit. And one of the big ahas when we were putting all this together was the separate reporting of expenses. The sub-grant share that you're receiving from us versus the match that you are providing needs to be accounted for in two separate buckets. We have to roll all this together based on sub-grant and match, and then we have to do the same from our standpoint. So we're actually going to be taking 4 buckets and reporting one time to the federal government, but we need to be able to support the 4 buckets for the expenses, be they salary or direct expenses, you know, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit different than some federal grants, but because of the nature of this intermediary sub-grantee model that they're using, they want to see that they're getting the results from the sub-grantees for the dollars that are being expended. And now it's application time, but I think Megan's going to help you with that.
We'll pause for just a second to see if anybody has any questions. Thanks, Elise. A couple of things that I want to note. So for those of you who are currently United Way funded, Elise is right. I have been calling this United Way on steroids because it is much more rigorous than what we currently do from a financial perspective and then also a reporting perspective, so the frequency is different. So just keep that in mind as you think about applying for this. And then, you know, the other thing that I just want to note is that our intent with the information sessions as we lead into our RFP trainings in early December, this is really an opportunity to ask us the tough questions so that you can opt in or opt out based on what you're able to do as part of your own agency or your program's work. So we're here to answer questions. Michael Gore had to leave a bit early, so if you have Strive questions, I told him that I will pinch hit to the best of my ability, but we can also get back to you if you have something very specific. And then, of course, evaluation, and before we hear from our third Michael of the day. So if you haven't picked up yet, you have to be named Michael or have a really good sense of humor to work on SIF. That's our requirement. So questions that the group has about, yeah, go ahead.
And if there's kind of no way for application or for organizations to submit a collaborative application, or if there's any way to go about that without subgranting that you could suggest.
Right. So the question is, what's the restriction on subgranting? If you are a subgrantee, if you can't subgrant out funds, what does that mean for any kind of collaborative approach that you might have as it relates to SIF? And the answer is that you can contract with partners, but we do need one lead fiscal applicant that would provide perspective into how you plan on partnering. So contracting is fine, but you just could not subgrant out money to do that work. Elise, is there anything you would add to that? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Audrey.
Outside of other United Way funds that you might be receiving, is that accurate?
Yes. So the question is, does the cash match need to be separate from current United Way funds that you may be receiving? And yes, they would need to be separate. So they would need to be new dollars that would come in to support the SIF work. Good question. Yes. Mm-hmm. Really good question. So the question is, of the current SIF grantees in year 1 and year 2, are they partnering with primarily local partners as subgrantees or as national partners as subgrantees? And it's really all across the board. It just depends on the model that they're implementing. So some of the SIF recipients are national organizations who are implementing this with many, many sub-grantees. Some are very targeted with local implementation. But we actually, as we were going through a clarifying round with the Social Innovation Fund, one of the places that we were pushed back on is to really do a national search. And that was one of the pieces that the corporation really wanted to see. And so that's why we're extending it broadly in terms of our search for sub-grantees. But it really just depends on the work that the individual grantees are doing. Yes. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was doing so good, Michael, up until then. The question is, are other public entities allowed to apply outside of nonprofits, such as schools or government agencies? And the answer to that is yes, they are allowed to apply for SIF funds. Yes. So we are open to any strong proposals with, the question is, do we have priorities of the areas that we're focused on, either early grade literacy or the post-secondary, the college and career readiness component? We actually are open to any strong proposals that are aligned against any of the 5 goals that have been outlined by STRIVE. So the slide that we have around kindergarten readiness, early grade literacy, 8th grade algebra, high school graduation, post-secondary options, those are all open for strong proposals that would come in. We haven't prioritized. Can I take one question behind you first? Thanks.
Yes, I just wanted to ask for clarification regarding the research aspect of the proposal itself. Am I correct in hearing that you're looking for applicants who already can present evidence that what they're doing is working? And so if they don't have evidence or any kind of study data that they've already done, they probably should not consider applying?
So the question is levels of evidence of a program that's actually applying for SIF funds. Do they actually have to have those levels of evidence, the preliminary levels of evidence, in order to apply for SIF? The distinction is, and Michael, if you want to jump in, the distinction that you'll see in the RFP is that you need to demonstrate that your program has preliminary evidence, levels of evidence, or a program similar to yours has the preliminary level of evidence. Now, I will say we're expecting this to be highly competitive, so that will be one of the aspects that we look at when we review with Michael's expertise on this. And then, Michael, I'll look to you. Is there anything that you want to clarify on that?
No, you did it very well. One reason it's preliminary is it could be someone else's evidence, David. It might not be yours. But I can't see a winning application without the ability to make it clear why this ought to work. I mean, that's the logic model. That's going to have to be there as well.
So a couple of questions that we have from our online partners here. One is, are charter schools and or school districts eligible to apply? The question is yes. That is an area, a category of folks who can apply for funding. And part 2 of that question, do new dollars have to be from a new funder, for example, no prior relationship, or can a current funder allocate additional matching funds for this purpose? You can actually have current existing relationships where the dollars are allocated towards this purpose. It doesn't have to be a brand new funder. So we expect that many people will ask their current funders for additional support in this area. It doesn't have to be somebody brand new. And then, is there a limit to the percent of admin that can be included in the budget? I'm looking at Elise for this question.
There is not a specific limit to the administrative cost. The corporation and SIF does not look at it, the dollars, as you're going to get 20% to cover your admin. They are looking for specific cost allocation. If you've got some indirect cost, we need to know exactly what those direct costs are and how they're being allocated. They're not about the normal 20% admin costs, and you don't have to document. We're not going to deal with the indirect cost rate in this case. SIF and the corporation basically says, like I said, they want specific costs detailed.
Another question that came in online is, what is the maximum amount that you can apply for? I will say the minimum amount that you can apply for is $100,000. That's the minimum for the award that will be given. And really, you know, given that we have $800,000 to give out, we will definitely be looking at all of these things that we've been talking about today: levels of evidence, financial capabilities in terms of executing against the grant, and then, of course, the actual program design and theory of change that you will provide to understand where our investments will go the furthest. But it will definitely be a minimum of $100,000. Other questions? Yeah. So we definitely, as always, I'm sorry, thank you. The question was, are we aligning against other partners? Is it expected to align with current work that's happening in the community? And, you know, we'll dig in very deeply to the RFP and the requirements on December 3rd. But as always, we are certainly interested in really strong alliances and partnerships to maximize this work. I think one of the beautiful things about the Social Innovation Fund is that it's a way for us to think about our work and not doing business as usual, right? So we're looking for really innovative strategies that can help get us to the next level of impact for kids. So if that means strong partnerships, absolutely. Yes. So the question is, how many years are we looking at funding sub-grants? So when you dig into the RFP when it's released, we'll be looking for 2 years' worth of a program budget. And ideally what would happen is we would get great results and we'll be funded for up to 5 years. But we definitely, so this is again for United Way funded agencies, we're definitely digging in and managing sub-grants in a very different way. So the expectations are much higher, and we'll be working with sub-grantees in a more hands-on way than some of you are probably used to. And so the expectation of getting results across those 2 years will be really important. And then, again, based on available funds and our overall portfolio performance, we'll be looking to renew grants.
Thank you. This ties nicely to the previous question about how long is the grant period. And part of the issue around the 2-year grant really has to do with whether or not the federal funding will be there. And there's no reason not to say that out loud. Although we're very encouraged that the length of the grant for good programs productive programs will be the 5 years. I agree with you that some sorts of things are absolutely laughable about the goals of the changes you're going to make, and we're going to hold you to that in 1 year. That is, in so many ways, crazy. But one of the kinds of things that we would do is develop different sets of near-term and longer-term outcomes. And one of the issues, of course, in the evaluation, I think it'll be traditional in the sense of statistical operation and statistical thinking. I mean, I'm too old to get untraditional right now. But what's going to happen is that we will work very hard with the successful sub-grantees, those that make awards. And here you're going to respond to an RFP. One thing I ought to let you know is that there's going to be a long period where we have to work together to produce a sub-grantee evaluation plan that the feds have to approve. So it's not as simple as our getting together, liking your application, and it looks good, go to work, here's your money. No, it's going, that kind of monitoring that Megan was talking about is going to occur. And we were already notified that no one's first draft of their sub-grantee evaluation plan is ever approved. They always send it back. So we work a little longer into the summer, and we get it approved. The reason I draw this out is that I don't think we will make any foolish kinds of claims about what we can do in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. But I think it's a matter of being absolutely clear in how we think the program works, what are the appropriate near-term and long-term measures, and reading by third, I'm sure that it's going to have something to do with MCA2s, that they're just going to require it. But there's going to be other measures too. I hope that helps. Your question is excellent.
If I can add just a bit to that as well, and Michael is saying this, one of the things that sets SIF apart is that we will be doing individual sub-grant evaluation plans with each and every sub-grantee. So it's a different level of support than what you might receive from other funders, or if you're currently United Way funded, it's different than what you might currently do. And then again, there's that overall portfolio evaluation that will take place too. So it will be working in partnership with our sub-grantees, and as Michael mentioned, what are the kind of near-term goals that we can meet as it relates to evaluation, and what are some of those longer term. I want to just address a few questions that have come up from our webinar folks. One of the questions that has come up is, when will we expect to announce who the sub-grantees will be? And we'll get into the timeline a little bit later, but we expect that to happen right around April 1st, which was not planned for April Fool's Day, just so you know. Another question that came up was around the award. Is it $50,000 per year for 2 years, or is it $100,000 per year? It's a minimum of $100,000 per year for the length of at least 2 years, as we've said. Another question that came up was, is this targeted towards early grade literacy or up to 3rd grade, or is it available for all age groups, K through 12? It's actually available for all against those goals that we laid out as part of STRIVE. So kids being ready for kindergarten, reading by 3rd grade, 8th grade algebra, high school graduation, and so on. And so we do want to get a good pool of applicants who are aligned against those goals. And someone wanted to know when the slide deck would be available as well. That will be available online, and we'll share that website at the end of this session of where you can get all of the materials that we're talking about today. Did I miss any of that? Good. Yeah. So the question is, did we say in our application the number of children that we would serve through our own SIF sub-grantees? And yes, we did, and we said that we would serve between 2,500 and 3,000 children per year. So the question is, are we 2 years into the project? To clarify that, the federal government is 2 years into the project, and this is year 3 of the federal project, but year 1 for us. So we are a recipient of the year 3 SIF process. But they've been underway for 2 years with other grantees. Yes, Giovanni.
Certain indicators like children's reading proficiency. But are you also looking for unique or specific program components or elements that impact those outcome achievements? So for example, in this portfolio, are you looking for culturally specific approaches to compare with traditional approaches? Are you looking for certain factors that contribute to the outcomes that you're looking for, and will that feed into the criteria or the sort of portfolio that you're trying to pull together?
Yes, if I sum up what you're saying, Giovanni, and tell me if I'm not capturing this right, but what's the criteria that we'll be looking for as it relates to the programs that we fund, as it relates to evidence, and then the potential for kind of innovation in programs that we'd be able to scale? Is that capturing in a nutshell?
That, as well as, do you all have a picture of the sorts of the range that you're looking to accomplish in your portfolio? So are you looking to contrast traditional approaches with new approaches with, as you all look at your entire portfolio, and are you looking for innovation, and what does that mean, and what does that look like?
Right. So this has actually come up a lot. Are we looking for innovation, and how are we defining innovation, and what will we be actually looking for in the pool of subgrantees? And I'll say one of the tricky parts about the Social Innovation Fund is the word innovation, right? So it's not innovative in the sense that we're looking for programs that are completely out of the box and new strategies that haven't been tested. We would still need to see those preliminary levels of evidence as defined by Michael, and then you'll see it very clearly laid out in the RFP as well, that you have strong research that it has the evidence to actually work, right? So you'd have to demonstrate those preliminary models. But to get at your question around the cultural relevance, that's something that's extremely important to us in the actual RFP, and something that will be used to score the overall proposals as well. So we're interested in really innovative strategies as long as we have a preliminary level of evidence that they will meet the goals of the Social Innovation Fund. Does that answer your question? Sure, go ahead.
And so being full with them, identify best practices, scale, and then replicate them. Our evaluation plan, do we need to spell out not just outcomes that we want for children, but what are those evidence-based program design that could help inform?
Yeah, so the question part 2 is, when you spell out your evaluation plan as part of the application, you need to spell out not only outcomes for children, but the strategies that help you get to those outcomes and why they contribute to your evidence base. Is that accurate? So yes, you'll have questions in the actual application that will definitely want you to explain your evaluation and what you're working on, but we also want to know what the essence is of your program that is contributing to that factor. And we're thinking about that as our theory of change and then your program model. So you'll have ample opportunity to talk about those elements and the impact that you're having with your strategies. So yeah, we do want to know that kind of detail. Michael, anything you'd add to that?
Want the connection. A very important narrative to be able to deliver.
Yeah.
Tying into that conversation, when you're looking for the preliminary levels of evidence in the application, kind of as the output for the grant, are you looking for those moderate levels of evidence to come out of the grant or strong levels of evidence? And does it relate, maybe fewer children will be served if you're going to provide strong levels of evidence, but more children could be served at the moderate level? Are you kind of taking that into consideration?
So I'll let Michael answer this one, but the question is, in terms of levels of evidence in the application, what are the expectations of providing demonstrated ability in either preliminary, moderate, or strong, and will that equate to numbers served? Am I hearing you correctly? Okay.
We have not talked about a criterion that is very directly related to numbers served. In other words, it doesn't mean that the people on the various committees here at United Way and Strive, they might have figures in their head, but it hasn't serviced me. I don't want to make anything up. But I usually make stuff up.
So the intent is the hope that we will strong evidence practices as a part of this grant or
no.
Is that really quick? So the question is the expectation that you would demonstrate strong levels of evidence in your application related to SIF?
Demonstrate it in the application to SIF, I'd be very surprised.
And not necessarily in the application of the grant.
The pressure we're putting on ourselves as colleagues, you and I, is to get you to moderate at least from 1 to 5 years.
Just to clarify that in terms of levels of evidence and our expectations around levels and numbers served, you know, thinking about our own work here at United Way, I think the majority of our programs fall somewhere between preliminary and moderate, right? I think we have very few that lend towards the strong levels of evidence. So as you think about your work, that's something that we're already thinking about for applications. And then in terms of numbers served, we're much more interested in making sure that we select strong sub-grantees who are kind of the complete package, right? They're able to deliver on at least preliminary levels of evidence. They have good strategies in place. They have good financial compliance mechanisms in place at the organization. They have demonstrated ability to take on this kind of rigor around a grant. That's what's really important to us as we do this. It won't be a number scan. That'll certainly be something we're interested in, but not a make or break criteria. Any other questions before I turn it over to Michael? There will be ample opportunity to ask questions. If you think of something after you leave today, you can shoot us an email at sif@unitedwaytwincities.org, and we'll share that here in a minute. We'll be posting many of these questions and our frequently asked questions on our website, so you can reference them there as well. So feel free to reach out to us. There will be another opportunity to hear an information session to one of your colleagues. That will be on Wednesday of this week, and that will also be posted on our website. And then we're doing our actual RFP trainings, which we'll talk more about in just a moment, the week of December 3rd. So that's when the application will go live on December 3rd, and we'll spend much more time digging into the actual requirements of the RFP at that time, as well as the full application. So Michael is here to give you a preview of the application and what to expect.
Thanks, Megan. And just to reiterate what Megan said, this is going to be pretty brief. I anticipate my comments being very brief here. Is the December 3rd application training will be available for those who do go forward and choose to make the application. And at that point, we'll go into the mechanics of how to apply and take a look at the application itself. So right now, I want to draw your attention, again, there are those dates. I want to draw your attention to the SIF website, which has been put together so that you have reference material and different contact information pieces as you have questions. web address for that, which should be in your PowerPoint back there, is www.unitedwaytwincities.org/SIF, SIF, and that will take you to this page here. The PowerPoint slide deck for today is actually already up on the website, so it's available right here at this link. And the upcoming registration, the webinar registration link is also on here for the December 3rd date, as well as an overview of the timeline. Some other helpful documents are on this website. And finally, a link to request access to the application system is here. If you are confident that you will be going forward and making an application, it is a good idea to go ahead and request that an account be set up for you. Every individual needing access to the online application system will need an account set up. It is a somewhat manual process for us. We need to approve the request. Once we receive it, it takes 2 to 4 business days. So when we launch that application on the 3rd of December, if you would like immediate access, it's a good idea to request a new user account ahead of time. Some of the resources that will be available to you, a PowerPoint overview of using the system. We are going to have some kind of how-to videos. We certainly don't want the system itself to get in the way of you making this application. We want you to make the best possible application without having to worry about the technology side of things. So we are here to provide you support, and though I will certainly be providing this in the training on December 3rd, that technical support information is here. You would email support@unitedwaytwincities.org, or you would call us at 612-340-7534. Just a little bit about the service level agreement that we have available to you. We will be available to provide technical support Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And there's a document on the website that kind of details the service level we are able to provide. And finally, just a quick overview of the important dates. Yes, absolutely.
So I just want to walk us through the dates really quick so that we're clear on the process. Again, the RFP will be released on December 3rd. We'll host the orientations as needed beyond December 3rd and 5th if we need additional support for the grantees, but we'll have those in December. Applications will be due on January 11th at noon, just so and that's Central Time. We'll have those due at noon on January 11th Central Time. And then January and February is when we'll have our team reviewing the proposals and scoring those proposals. And then we will have site visits with our potential sub-grantees. And then those will go to the review committee. Now this is the Twin Cities Strive Review Committee who will actually approve these, not United Way's review committee, and then the executive committee of Strive as well. So our partners there will be reviewing these, and then funding is slated to begin on April 1st of 2013. And there's one step in here that's not on this list, but we will potentially be asking finalists to come in and present to the Twin Cities Strive Executive Committee and other key partners in our final decision-making process, which is a different step than what we typically do here at United Way. So I just want people to start thinking about the different steps that we'll have involved there in terms of getting our funding out the door. Any questions about the timeline? So again, if you have questions, here's the email address. Let us know, sif@unitedwaytwincities.org, sif@unitedwaytwincities.org. As Michael mentioned, technical support goes to support@unitedwaytwincities.org. Just to reiterate his comment of if you are seriously considering applying for the Social Innovation Fund, please do work to set up an account right now so that our support team here can have ample time to help people get that ready to go for December 3rd. And then again, check back frequently if you have questions at our website, which is www.unitedwaytwincities.org/SIF. Yes. So the question is, if I'm currently a current United Way funded organization, do I need to set up another account? And I'm going to let Michael answer that.
Is this working? Yep. So it is a new system. It is the same system we use for all reporting and applications as of this March. So if you have used the system since March to find healthy behaviors or the food opportunities, it would be the same system.
Did I have another question? in the audience? Yes, Giovanni. Really good question. So the question is, will the Social Innovation Funds have any impact on Greater Twin Cities United Way funds? This is a separate initiative of Twin Cities Strive as supported by Greater Twin Cities United Way. So we don't foresee any impact on our current multi-year funding that we have underway in our classic areas of early learning, reading by third grade, and out of school time. But that's a good question. And then there was one question that came in online about what's the relationship between Twin Cities Strive